When it comes to importance to the One Piece story, very few characters have been more influential than Portgas D Ace, with his decisions and actions having directly resulted in the Marineford War, as well as all of the events surrounding it. The fall of the Whitebeard Pirates, as well as the rise of the Blackbeard Pirates, had marked one of the most notable changes in the series to date, while the 2-year time skip that had accompanied it had seen the Straw Hat crew evolve from daring rookies with bags of potential into a properly established powerhouse that is capable of fighting and defeating even Yonkos. None of these plot points would have been possible without Ace, whose death had acted as a thread that had tied all of these plot points together. Portgas D Ace is a complex, nuanced character, and it's for this reason that I've made an entire character analysis video on him, breaking down and truly understanding his ideals, motivations, and aspirations. But in this video, I want to talk about a different topic related to Ace. We all know about the end of his character arc, but how did he spend his younger years? The fact is, Ace's complete story is actually not told within the One Piece manga. A portion of Ace's story is told within his own unique cover story titled Ace's Great Blackbeard Search, as well as a 2-part novel series which covers his time as a pirate between leaving Dawn Island at the age of 17 from all the way up until he leaves Whitebeard's ship in order to pursue Blackbeard 3 years later. These novels are something that I'd recommend for every One Piece fan to go and check out. They were also illustrated and adapted into manga form by the very talented author Boichi, who is a mangaka known for creating Dr. Stone and Sunken Rock. Now for this video, we will be covering the period of time between Ace's birth and the circumstances surrounding it, all the way up until his departure from Dawn Island at the age of 17, where he aims to make his own mark upon the world. Before we start Ace's story, we need to first look into the end of the former pirate king Goldie Roger's life. Roger's reputation is one that precedes him. He has left an incredible legacy behind as being one of the only men to have ever reached Laugh Tale, as well as the only man in history to have been crowned the Pirate King, and the captain of the crew who had conquered the Grand Line and discovered the truth of the world. Without Roger, there is no One Piece story. You only need to go as far as the introductory narration of One Piece Episode 1 to truly understand the heights that Goldie Roger had achieved. And yet, as far as the main timeline of One Piece is concerned, Roger has been deceased for over 20 years. His death came upon the execution platform at Logtown, a monument which stands even to this day. It was reported that Roger was captured by the marine hero Garp the Fist, but this was however propaganda that was disseminated by the world government, as the truth of these events was quite different. For years leading up to his death, Roger had been suffering from an incurable disease, and with his health deteriorating, he had decided to disband his crew and to turn himself into the Marines. However, in between the time that his crew was disbanded and he had turned himself into the Marines, he had come across a woman who was named Portgas D Rouge, and she had lived on the South Blue island of Batarilla. The two had fallen in love, and shortly afterwards Rouge had come to bear Roger's child, though Roger had realized that he would never be able to live to see the birth of his son. Now while in Marine custody, Roger had taken steps to protect his son by asking his long-term rival Monkey D. Garp to watch over Rouge and his son, knowing that in the eyes of the world, his son would be found guilty for his father's crimes. Ace's birth did not come until 15 months after Roger's death, and 20 months after his mother had first become pregnant. This was because Rouge had intentionally extended her pregnancy in order to disguise the fact that Ace was the Pirate King's son, in an attempt to grant him an extra layer of protection. Now the stress that this had induced onto Rouge's body had proved to be fatal, because she had died shortly after Ace's birth. Garp had honored his word and had fulfilled Roger's final request, and had taken the newly born Goldie Ace into his custody. Knowing that his position as a Marine Vice Admiral would make it impossible for him to care for Ace, he had taken Ace back to Dawn Island and had left him under the care of Curly Dadan, who was from the Dadan family, which is a group of bandits who had made their home on Mount Kolobo. They were too intimidated by Garp in order to refuse his request. So to protect Ace from the Marines and those who would wish him harm on account of his father, Ace would be renamed with his mother's family name Portgas. Ace had grown up isolated from others, and it was a consequence of being under the guardianship of bandits. Because of this, he would become extremely independent at a very young age, frequently venturing out into the forest and the nearby Grey Terminal, which was a massive junkyard that was home to all residents who were unworthy of residency within the neighboring city of Goa. Ace would go on to thrive within this lawless environment, but his early childhood was not without difficulty, as his feelings of self-worth would only diminish as he would hear the negative and often violent opinions of people who had disliked his father. Ace would respond to these people with greater levels of violence in return, even even beating some people to near death. Ace's insecurities had resulted in him questioning Garp upon one of his visits to the island, asking him whether he should have been born at all. Garp had responded that as long as he remains alive, he would find out eventually. Now this response from Garp had remained with Ace throughout the rest of his life. Ace was a character whose goal in life was to determine his own self-worth. Ace's actions can often take different meanings, and in particular the conflicting emotions that he feels during his final moments within Marineford. Returning to Ace's childhood, it was during this period of time before his 10th birthday that he was first introduced to Sabo, a young runaway who was living within Great Terminal. The two would soon become close friends, and they would work together in order to achieve their shared dream of one day becoming pirates. To this end, they would work together to steal money and treasure from any source they could find. They would combine the stolen goods into a shared fund which would be used to prepare for the day that they could finally set off to the sea. Ace had also met Luffy at the age of 10, who had been brought by Garp to live with the bandits. Similar to how he had dropped Ace off with the bandits a decade prior, Ace was initially very unwelcoming to Luffy's presence, even spitting on him to show his disgust at the idea of him living with them. Luffy was unfazed by this and would endeavor to become Ace's friend. This continued on for 3 months, with Ace's annoyance becoming plain through his multiple attempts to kill Luffy, thankfully none of which were proved to be successful. Now this daily routine was only broken when one day Luffy had followed Ace to one of his meetups with Sabo. The two boys were comparing the amount of treasure that they had each acquired and adding it to their collection. Now because Luffy was now aware of their dreams of becoming pirates as well as the location of their treasure stash, Ace and Sabo had both decided to kill Luffy in order to protect their secret, but thankfully neither of them were willing to be the one to do so. Now this stalemate was broken when Portgas, the first mate of the Blue Jam Pirates, had emerged nearby searching for Ace, since a portion of the treasure that Ace had stolen had belonged to him. Now for context, the Blue Jam Pirates were the preeminent group within Dawn Island, and a famous crew within East Blue. Their captain Blue Jam held a 14 million berry bounty, a very impressive sum for a East Blue pirate. It's for this reason that Ace and Sabo wanted to avoid getting into conflict with them, which is why they had decided to hide from Portgas. Luffy, however, had been tied to a tree by Ace and Sabo to prevent him from escaping. He was eventually captured and taken away as he was calling out to Ace for help all the while. Ace and Sabo had assumed that Luffy would reveal the location of their treasure to Portgas after they had tortured him, so it's for this reason that they had moved their treasure to another secure location. But after they had finished the task, they had realized that Luffy had yet to reveal Ace's location to the Blue Jam Pirates, despite many hours having passed. They had realized that Luffy had been holding out against the pirates in order to protect Ace and Sabo. The two had finally then decided to stage a rescue mission as they broke into the Blue Jam Pirates base of operations, freeing Luffy and defeating Portgas. Luffy's actions endeared himself to both Ace and Sabo, and following a very heartfelt discussion where Luffy reveals his motives behind wanting to befriend Ace, which stemmed from his fear of loneliness. The three had eventually become friends. However, since the actions of the three had built them a level of infamy within Great Terminal and made an enemy out of Portgas, they had decided that to ensure his safety, Sabo would move into Dandan's household alongside Ace and Luffy. Months would pass and the boys would continue their adventures throughout the island, venturing through the forest and Great Terminal for entertainment, as well as fighting each other 100 times every day for training. Ace would prove the strongest of the trio, narrowly beating out Sabo in their matches, while both he and Sabo would defeat Luffy with little trouble due to his inexperience with his devil fruit. On one of their adventures, in which they snuck into the Goa Kingdom itself, they would encounter a man who appeared to recognize Sabo, calling out to him by his name. Sabo had denied any knowledge of who the man was. However, when confronted, he had admitted that the man was in fact his father, and that he was originally a noble who had fled from his home. It was after this that the three of them had proclaimed their dreams for the future to each other. Sabo had wished to see as much of the world as he could and to write a book about it. Luffy's dream had remained unspecified, while Ace had wished to become one of the most notorious pirates in the world, someone so infamous that the opinions of others would no longer matter to him. As a mark of their new bond, they had stolen a bottle of sake from Dandan, and they had performed a Sakazuki ceremony, formalizing their brotherhood. Their peaceful routine would come to an end shortly afterwards when the Blue Jam Pirates and Sabo's father had tracked them down, forcibly taking Sabo away. Sabo's father had told the pirates to do as they wished with Ace and Luffy, but Sabo had pleaded for their safety by promising that he would go along with his father without any objections. His father had accepted these terms, and together they had returned to their home within the Goa Kingdom. The Blue Jam Jam Pirates would keep to their agreement to not harm Ace and Luffy, and they would instead have them assist the pirates in relocating some boxes around Great Terminal. It was a few days later when the purpose of this work was revealed. Blue Jam was in fact requesting Ace and Luffy's help in order to burn down the entirety of Great Terminal on the order of the Goa Kingdom nobles. This was in preparation for the arrival of a celestial dragon. Knowing the number of lives that would be lost because of this, the boys had protested, but it was ignored. The two of them were tied to a pole to prevent them from interfering with their plans, and as night had fallen, the Blue Jam Pirates had set the terminal ablaze. Ace was able to free himself and Luffy, however, as they had attempted to flee, they were confronted by the pirates, with Blue Jam demanding to know the location of their treasure stash. By this point, the Blue Jam Pirates had been betrayed by the nobles, who had refused them entry into the city and had left them to burn in the fire that they had created. Ace eventually had relented to Blue Jam's demands and had revealed where their treasure was located. However, Blue Jam had forced both him and Luffy to come with him in order to ensure that they weren't lying. Now, while on the way, Blue Jam had swore revenge against the nobles of the Goa Kingdom, and he had also insulted Sabo for being one of them. Now, this had enraged Luffy, who had attempted to fight back against the pirates but was brutally attacked in retaliation. As one of the pirates was about to strike Luffy with his sword, Ace had let out a yell of desperation, which had subconsciously activated his Conqueror's Haki, resulting in all of the pirates being knocked out with the exception of Blue Jam. Now, this was the second youngest display of Conqueror's Haki shown within the One Piece story, as Ace was only surpassed by Doflamingo's activation, which had taken place when he was only 8 years old. Blue Jam would face off against Ace and would eventually use his greater strength and experience to gain the upper hand in their fight. He was prevented from shooting Ace in the head by the arrival of the Dadan family, who had arrived to rescue the pair. Ace had refused to retreat, however, and once again had faced off with Blue Jam, now this time with Dadan by his side, as the remainder of the family had retreated with Luffy. Now, with Dadan's aid, Blue Jam was eventually defeated, but not before the entire area had been engulfed in flames. Dadan ended up receiving significant burns while helping Ace through the fire. They had delayed their return to the hideout while Ace had scoured the town for medical supplies. Now, at this point, Dadan would ask Ace why he had refused to run from Blue Jam when they had the chance, to which he would respond that he couldn't, as Luffy was behind him and he had needed to keep him safe. After Dadan and Ace had returned to their hideout, a member of a crew Dogra had revealed to the boys some heartbreaking news, that while Sabo was attempting to set out to sail in order to finally escape from his family and in order to achieve his dream, his ship was shot down and he was killed by a celestial dragon who was visiting Dawn Island. Luffy was really distraught hearing this news, while Ace flew into a rage and had attempted to set off to avenge Sabo's death. He was restrained by Dadan, knowing that only death would await Ace if he had attempted to harm a celestial dragon. She informed him that what truly had killed Sabo was the world that they live in, and that without becoming much stronger than he is now, Ace would be unable to ever avenge Sabo. She then ordered her family to tie Ace to a tree in order to prevent him from escaping. Ace was released the following morning, having finally calmed down. He had received a letter that was sent by Sabo prior to his departure. The letter had explained Sabo's decision to leave and why he was choosing to set out to sea early, expressing his wish that one day he could meet his brothers again out on the seas, and requesting that Ace would look after Luffy while he was gone. After receiving the message, Ace had ventured out to the coast, where he found Luffy still crying over the loss of their brother. Equally broken over what had happened, Luffy had promised to get stronger, and he had pleaded for Ace to never die. Ace had promised Luffy, and while being motivated by Sabo's final letter, he had resolved to live a life without regrets, just as Sabo had attempted to do. The two brothers had then promised to train until the age of 17, where they would then finally set out to sea just as Sabo had done before them, in order to achieve their dreams. Now, I will mention this here briefly, and this will be a significant spoiler for anyone who hasn't read or watched the Dressrosa arc, but Sabo ultimately had survived his brush with death, having been saved by Monkey D. Dragon and the Revolutionary Army. But for the majority of the story, he was suffering from amnesia, causing him to forget his past other than his wish to escape from Dawn Island. Now, as this video is covering Ace, and because at no point in the story does Ace ever learn Sabo had survived, I will not explore this in great detail. If, however, you are interested in how the story may have advanced if Sabo had regained his memories at some point and encountered Ace once again, I recommend that you check out the One Piece special episode Luff, which is a 3-chapter what-if story exploring this concept that had ran within the first 3 volumes of the One Piece magazine. Ace and Luffy had led a pretty uneventful life on Dawn Island following Sabo's death. The brothers felt Sabo's loss sharply, especially in the period immediately following his death. However, with time their wounds had begun to heal and the pair had continued their life of adventure and training. And at one point, Ace had even requested that Makino, a bar owner from Fuchsia village and longtime friend of the pair, would teach Ace manners so that at some point in the future he could properly thank Redhead Shanks for saving Luffy and allowing him to have a little brother. Ace and Luffy would continue to grow stronger for the next 7 years until the day had finally come for Ace to depart from his home and to set sail into the world of piracy. From this point, Ace had gone on to create his own pirate crew called the Spades. They would go on to adventure through the first half of the Grand Line, resulting in him eventually battling against Whitebeard and then joining the Whitebeard crew, which would lead to him departing from the Whitebeard Pirates in order to fight Blackbeard years later. Now, all of these topics I've covered within my character analysis of Ace, so definitely go and check out that video if you want to see me dive more into these topics. However, if there is a demand for it, I will make a follow-up video similar to this one, where I'll go in depth into the story of Ace that is told within One Piece Novel A, Volumes 1 and 2. I really hope that you've enjoyed yet another video on one of my favourite One Piece characters, and let me know all of your thoughts about the backstory of Portgas D Ace. Was there anything that I've forgotten to mention within this video, and did you learn anything new about Ace's character? Definitely continue the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next One Piece video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.